You can't build a house on sand. You need that firm foundation. And that foundation for a runner is eating enough and getting those basic needs met. And then we can have some fun with it and get picky about, sweet potatoes or beets or carbs or protein. But that's down the road. We need to meet the needs first and foremost.
That was Courtney Berling today on the Running Effect podcast. Guys, I thoroughly not only enjoyed this conversation, but gained a lot of insights and valuable insights and wisdom on the topic of nutrition and eating and how to properly take care and nourish your body. Courtney is a registered dietitian. She's also a pretty accomplished runner. I want to say she's run 257 in the marathon and 119 in the half, 1710 in the 5K. I hope I have all of those correct. She actually used to run for the University of Cincinnati back in college, and now she's a registered dietitian helping runners properly fuel themselves and helping fix and solve a lot of the misconceptions along the way, which she discusses in today's conversation. A lot of this centers around the problem of underfueling, and we also go into some pretty niche subjects like body image, periods, how you should be fueling through like so many different circumstances and scenarios. Again, this one is packed. This is probably one of the most like value packed episodes I've ever done. And so I know you guys are going to enjoy it. And when you do, when you finish it, send it with a friend to help us out, give us a 5-star review, and make sure you are following the podcast or subscribed wherever you are listening so you never miss another episode. With all of those notes aside, I hope you all enjoy this conversation with the one and only Cortney Berling. Courtney Berling, welcome to the Running Effect podcast. How are you doing this afternoon?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me.
You have a saying out there where you say you don't have to be thin to win. I think that is excellent. And I think a lot of people think the opposite. So why is that the case, Courtney?
Oh my gosh, that's such a great question to get us started. I think so many runners are focused on being the smallest version of themselves without realizing that the smallest and thinnest version of themselves isn't necessarily the best version of themselves. You have to eat and fuel in order to be strong enough to take on all of those miles. And that's what's going to get you so much further, literally and figuratively.
I think a lot of younger athletes specifically who haven't done their own research and they just see things on social media or whatever it might be, or just they think if I weigh less, I will be faster. When in reality, as you're about to share, I'm sure that's just not at all the case. But I think a lot of people are in this fixed mindset of like smaller and lighter is actually faster.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what's been preached to us for so long. Like, especially if we look at like Alberto Salazar, right, the coach at Nike, Nike Oregon Project for so long there. I mean, he was working with his athletes and he would weigh them before races, before practice. And if they were over a certain weight, he would focus on weight loss. And there's a famous quote by Mary Cain, and she says, I lost the race before it even started because she was so undernourished. And had she been focusing on fueling to be strong, she could have been an amazing athlete. Like, we don't even know what her potential could have been, but Alberto Salazar was so focused on making her smaller to be better. And he was just all wrong there.
Why do you think as humans we find it hard to put ourselves in like a separate group? Because I think, for instance, a lot of people might compare themselves to race cars and they'll be like, oh, well, race car, if it's lighter, it's faster. And it's like, you can use that analogy to an extent. But also if a race car is not fueled properly, it's not going to go, right?
Exactly. I mean, I like to think of us very similar to race cars, except for humans are, of course, way more complex than a race car. But like, you have to put gasoline in the tank before you go on a road trip. You have to put fuel in your body before you run a marathon. And yes, lighter, I mean, like basic physics, if you're lighter and you have less mass to move, you will likely move faster, which is why people are genetically made for running. Like there's just a certain body type that typically does a little bit better running. Then that doesn't mean that running, you have to look a certain way to be a good runner, but there is a build that is better and it is a little easier for your body just naturally. But you have to work within your genetics. If you're trying to go against your genetics to be at a lower weight, it's like taking parts out of the car. Like the car's just not going to run as well.
I want to state this. If I say anything that is inaccurate or untrue or you disagree with, please butt in. And I would love to hear it. So I'll make some assumptions or statements that I'm guessing you'll agree with, but if they're wrong, just butt in. Okay. You have the full floor there. It's my opinion, I think, that like when I have talked to people like you or done my own research or studying, it is way more important that you eat enough than what you're specifically eating, because I think we have this like fascination and culture, specifically in the running world, of like, do I eat sweet potatoes or beets for dinner, or like as my vegetable? And it's like, you should be focusing on eating enough, and then it's like a very small subcategory underneath that of like what you're eating.
Oh my
Is that
gosh, you
true?
said that so perfectly. Like, I
Okay.
want everybody to like rewind and listen to that again because that is so important. If we were looking at like a pyramid, right? The base of it is eating enough. Nothing else is going to matter. What you eat, like how much protein or carbs isn't going to really matter, or pre-run, post-run snack isn't going to matter if you're not meeting that baseline foundation. You can't build a house on sand. You need that firm foundation, and that foundation for a runner is eating enough and getting those basic needs met, and then we can have some fun with it and get picky about, sweet potatoes or beets or carbs or protein. But that's down the road. We need to meet the needs first and foremost.
I've heard this. I'm curious to hear if this is true, that like if you haven't eaten a meal, or like you're behind on eating for the day, and your only option is like something quote unquote unhealthy, and unhealthy as in whatever, I'll give you, if there's a donut in front of you and that's the only option, that it is actually healthier to eat that donut than to not eat that donut.
100% true. I even have an Instagram post that says something along the lines of like, if you think unfuel or no, if you think junk food is bad for you, let me tell you how bad underfueling is. Meaning exactly that. Like, if your only option is just this, like whatever fast food or some sort of convenience food, take it. That is the best option. And we want you fed is best, right? We say that to moms with newborn babies, like whether you can breastfeed them or formula feed them, fed is best. Well, guess what? That continues into our adult life. We need to be fed first, and then we can get fancier with it.
I'm assuming you would say that like consistency is what's most important, because yes, if you're having a donut every day for lunch and that's your only option, like over time, that's going to translate to negative outcomes. And even in terms of like mindsets, like it's the long-term trajectory and beliefs and mindsets and actions that ultimately stack up over time, both from a negative perspective but also a positive perspective. You could eat this entire week super clean to a T. You could work with Courtney and nail her program, but if you only do it for a week and then the next 2 weeks you're under feeling and then you go back and forth and back, like you're not going to see positive outcomes.
Definitely. Consistency is key, and it's hard because that's not super sexy. That doesn't sell. We're not saying all these bold claims that, in 1 week we can do this, because that's what people want. We want short-term result. We want to work for just a short period of time and see the results, right? We like Instagram and we like Amazon because it's fast, but it's the consistency that really pays off. And so, you said it best there with, negatively, some of the poor choices. I don't like to think of food as good and bad, but if you're
Right.
choosing things that don't make your body feel good, but you do that all the time, you're not gonna feel good. Being healthy is about having healthy habits and healthy behaviors consistently. And when you nail that, that's when you're going to feel your best. I think of nutrition as an art and a science together. There's all the research that's out there, but then there's the art of listening to your body and intuitive eating and understanding your cravings. And when we mesh those together, that's when we find our sweet spot. And that's when we become a better athlete.
Courtney, this was definitely before your time. You weren't born, but like in the 70s or like 60s or 50s, was there a conversation around nutrition within sports to the extent that there is today? And if not, at what point do you think it started to become more prevalent, and why?
Oh my gosh, this is a great question. I mean, sir, okay, I wasn't alive in the
Yeah,
70s, so
yeah.
thank you for recognizing that.
I was like, you
Might
have a
be a little
1-year-old. There's no
stereotypic, but
way.
I'm not that old. So it definitely was not a thing at all back then. I mean, the early marathons, like nobody was taking a gel in the middle of a marathon. Like that didn't exist. And I wish I knew off the top of my head, like when that we started doing that. We can look that up. Google could tell us, or AI, I'm sure, can let us know. But I don't know when that started, but it has come so far, so fast. But the biggest thing is that female athlete nutrition hasn't been researched until just the last couple of years. We always just we would do nutrition research studies on young male athletes. So, we're looking at like someone who's like 20, 25 years old, like kind of that like collegiate age there. And we would get those nutrition recommendations and, see what the results are from that study, and then just shrink it and pink it and like, put some pink on it and call it for a girl. We just shrink down those recommendations and like, oh, this is good for a female athlete. But that wasn't that we were totally missing the mark. And so just up until really just a couple years ago, I'm trying, like, what year are we even in now? 2025. So, right around 2020, 2021 is when more female athlete nutrition studies have been taking off. And Dr. Stacey Sims has kind of been like the pioneer in that. And her books are great for any female athletes listening. But yeah, it's been definitely a new and progressive up and coming field.
I have some science for you, or some fact for you off of the gels conversation. It says
Yeah.
energy gels started being used in marathons in the 1980s. The invention of energy gels is often credited to the brand Goo Energy Labs, which was founded in 1993. So they are quite new, super new.
1993.
Yeah,
That is so new. I mean,
that is
that
super
was still
new.
like 20 years ago, but still
But it's
like,
still, yeah, crazy.
yeah,
To the
good. And
points you
that's
were talking about in regards to newer studies in regards to females and female nutrition and sports, what are the biggest differentiating marks between male nutrition and female nutrition?
oh
Because I
man,
think
that
that's
is,
important to address, because it's not cookie cutter. And this is why, I mean, we could probably do a whole podcast on social media and how it's just all false, almost all of it out there. But like, it's not fair to just like throw out a statement. It's always individualistic, even within, the genders.
yeah, wow. That your question about, what's the biggest difference between male and female athletes, like that could be a whole episode in itself, but we'll answer this in a short amount of time here. I would say if I had to just narrow it down to like two or three things, the biggest thing is that something like intermittent fasting can work for a male athlete. You might see some results, you might feel better. It's case by case dependent. I'm still not necessarily for intermittent fasting, but for a female, absolutely not. Like, what a way to absolutely wreck your metabolism, jack up your cortisol level, and then eventually have more muscle breakdown and more fat storage. Like, it is doing all the opposite things that you think it could be doing. And then the second thing is not eating before a morning run. A man could go out and do it. It's fine. Like, you're going to be fine. Your hormones can handle that. A female body cannot. And it's not because we're weaker. It's just because we're genetically made different and our hormonal profile is different. And so when you get up in the morning, if you don't eat, specifically female athletes, your cortisol level, again, that stress hormone, is going to just continue to rise. And again, when that cortisol level is high, we get more fat storage, more muscle breakdown. That is not what we want happening when we're out there running for miles and miles. That's actually the last thing that we want. And so we need to calm down that central nervous system and the cortisol level by having that snack, by eating more to go out and be able to crush that run. And those two differences right there are, I would say, the biggest thing that social media gets wrong and that female athletes believe.
Fascinating. So interesting. I think something underneath this subset of category that I really want to ask you about is male athletes are the same all 365 days, all 30 days of the month. That is the biggest, far from the truth for a female athlete having a cycle and being incredibly different depending on where she is within that cycle. How much does nutrition change depending on where you're at in your cycle, and specifically when you're on your period?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And so everybody's going to be a little bit different, but if you know your cycle and you know where you're at, you can certainly use it to your advantage. You certainly need more carbohydrates the days leading up to your period, which is why a lot of women crave sweets before their period or crave more food in general. We have more caloric demand before we have our menstrual cycle. And so that's important that we're listening to our body, we're eating more carbohydrates because that's what our body really needs. And then you're actually most hormonally like a male when you're on your period. And so a lot of runners think like, oh my gosh, it would be the worst thing ever to be on my period during a race. Well, nobody really wants that. It's not an ideal situation, but hormonally speaking, it's not a bad thing. In fact, Paula Radcliffe
Really?
was open enough to share that she set the world record while she was on her period. And so, like, it's not all bad. And then you can handle more pain at that point in your cycle as well. So definitely the
What?
carbs leading up to
That's
it. And then,
crazy.
yeah, if you feel up to racing on your period, I know it doesn't suit you so well, Dominic, but for the females out there, yeah, you can certainly use it to your advantage. And I think it's important to note as well that if you're a female athlete of menstruating age and you don't have a period, major red
Mm,
flag.
mhm.
So, I'll be honest, in my younger years, I wasn't regular. And I would for a while, I would just lie to the doctor and just, I don't know. I don't remember when it was, or, just make every time you go to a doctor's appointment, they'll ask you, when was your last period? And I would just make something up or like brush it under the rug. And then eventually I got smart enough to like tell the doctor that I'd been missing. They didn't care. Not one of them. It was like, oh, don't worry about it when you want to have kids. We'll worry about it then. It's no big deal. Oh, you're a runner. Yeah, that's normal. Okay. I would use the word common. It is common, but it's not normal. And so you think like, oh, my training partner's missing hers too, or like my collegiate teammates are missing theirs. I used to think of it almost as like a badge of honor. It was like, oh, I'm really fit when I'm missing my period. Like I'm at like my peak shape. And I did not know that that was a huge disadvantage. And I actually was not as strong because I wasn't getting my period and I was massively losing bone mineral density. And I wish I had known that in my younger years. And so now, many, many, many years later, I recognize the benefit of it. And now I think of it in the total reverse, where I'm in my peak marathon training right now. I just did 20 miles and then 21, and then we're tapering down for the Eugene Marathon in a couple of weeks. And TMI, sorry for anybody listening, but like, I didn't lose my cycle at all this training cycle. And I'm so proud of that. And that's how we need to be thinking about it. Sorry, that was probably way more than you asked for, Dominic.
No. So good. And I think it's so helpful for people out there. Something I do want to nail down is just, I think there's a healthy level of scaring people. And that's like such a strong statement, but I think it's important to address the negatives and how, as a runner, these things actually affect you. So again, correct me if I'm wrong in any of this, but like, you not having your period in the present day is concerning, but the deeper concern is what is actually underneath the surface and like what is actually going on hormonally. You mentioned the thing about bone density. I know that is definitely a case when you're not having your period regularly. Can you talk about some of the negative side effects that come with not getting your period regularly?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, bone mineral density is by far the biggest concern because you are reaching, especially for those younger athletes, you are, stacking up your bone mineral density. You are at your peak bone mineral density age, where you should be reaching the highest level of bone mineral density at that collegiate age. And I feel like that's when a lot of female athletes are losing their period and not saying anything about it. And those are hypothetically, or I guess arguably, the most important years. So you are at an absolute increased risk for stress fracture. And that's going to set you back massively, especially if you're running collegiately or post collegiately and enjoying it. Obviously, nobody wants a stress fracture, but that's huge. Other things are too, though, like you might start losing some of your hair. You might start having some GI issues. I can't tell you how many runners come to me and they're like, I don't know what's going on with my GI system. My stomach's all messed up. And it's like, well, you're not eating enough. So your GI motility is slowing down. Things like hair growth and period and GI function is all tied together. And so those are just signs that we're not eating enough. And hormonally, then you're not benefiting. You're not able to recover the way that you should. And you're probably not sleeping the way that you should. It just kind of, the snowball keeps going.
Where does loss of period come from? And where can people like try to track it from? I'm sure there are doctors, but even as you said, like, and this is, if you're a doctor listening, I have respect for you. Like it's a hard profession, but like our medical system is so messed up in the US, and there are so many primary care doctors who it's just like, how many patients can we fit in a 24? I quite frankly don't trust many of them. So maybe that's a strong statement. It's my podcast, so I feel like I can make strong statements, but I trust you way more. So where does loss normally come from? And what would you say people should do if they don't have one? Like, where should they start to try and get it back?
Yeah, that's a great question. And Dominic, I totally agree. Like, I think there are great doctors out there, but it's the system that's really broken. Especially somebody who's like, I've lived abroad, I've lived in Japan, I've seen other medical systems, and and I've worked in hospitals where it is all about productivity and how fast you can see patients. And doctors don't like that either, but it's the way that it is. And so I will say, obviously seek out, help from your doctor, let somebody know. But if they come back and say, that's no big deal. Like I said, what they said to me, and it was more than one doctor that told me it was no big deal. And it is a big deal. So I think the number one place is, if you can think about it as your training is either too high or your nutrition is too low. We have to fill that gap. So you either have to commit to eating more, and specifically more carbohydrates and fat And people think about protein, and we're usually pretty comfortable with eating protein. No one's shy to throw down a protein shake or eat some more protein, but it's the carbohydrates and it's the fat that we need for the hormonal health. And so you either need to really commit to eating more or reducing that training load. It's whatever we can do to fill that gap. I'll be honest, so my whole story in a short version here is my husband had deployed to Iraq. He's active duty Marine Corps, and he was gone for like 9 months. And all I did was train. I mean, I worked too, but I didn't have kids yet. We just was at work and train, and that was it. And I was in like great shape. Ran 119 and a half and was like really, going after it. And he got home and we thought, oh, let's start a family. That seems like the next appropriate step here. We'd been married for a little while. And I didn't have a regular period. And it was like, oh, well, this is going to be pretty hard. So my choice was to actually stop training. But it was, in my eyes, it was a pretty drastic situation of like, oh my gosh, my whole family might be crumbling because I can't get this right. And so I did stop training. You don't have to stop training, but I would recommend at least reducing the load, adding in an extra rest day, and then committing to eating more because we have to fill that gap.
Can you speak to how the long term, like thinking long term, always makes more sense? Because I could see a sophomore in high school who wants to run D1 and knows she only has a year and a half window to be recruited by the school she wants to be recruited by, is terrified at the thought of reducing training or adding in a rest day over the next 2 months, when as a high schooler or a collegiate, for better or for worse, it's like work harder, work more. I wanted to do more mileage, and she's telling me,
Yeah.
but if you have that long-term perspective, like you said specifically, and I appreciate you sharing that about, starting a family, like this stuff can have long-term implications that you aren't even thinking about. And so you should think about them and make actions underneath that.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, when I was younger and missing my period, it was like great. Like, I don't have to worry about this and I don't have to deal with it. Like, this is not a bad thing. And it was like I said, certainly not only do we need to think long term and like, my future family, even if you think right now, like, I don't even know if I want kids when I get older, like you might, so you do need to think about that. But even more so, remember, you are better with a period. So if that means reducing your training load, you might actually have better outcomes by doing a little bit less. You are like, that is a classic sign of overtraining and you are doing too much. So, running is so different than like, say basketball, right? We just finished the Final Four, national championship in the basketball. And so, you can shoot free throws all night long and you're probably going to get better the more you shoot. Running is a little bit different where there's definitely a point of diminishing returns where you're not getting better. Like more miles doesn't always mean better. Sometimes, the equation is rest plus stress equals growth. If you're missing the rest, your body's not capitalizing on all that fitness and all the grind you're putting it through. So like I said, the fact that you're missing your period, yeah, it affects your future, but it's affecting you now. And that's what you need to recognize is doing more isn't necessarily making you better if you don't have a period. You're just setting yourself up for an injury, burnout, illness, your immune system is tanking, etc.
Final question on periods, and then I promise we'll move on. But I think it's important to address all of this. And I also think for all the guys out there listening, this is like important stuff to be aware of. And I think as a man, like we as a society, I think people will listen to podcasts like this and be like, oh, skip to the next section. And it's like, well, you'll probably get married one day and you'll probably have girls one day. Or if you're curious about coaching, like this stuff is important to know and be aware of. So you talked about going through this training cycle and, running these 21 mile runs, and you said you didn't lose your period. That makes me think that that loss of period can come from heavy training. Where does loss of period come from? And how can people be aware of like how what they do in their actions will directly affect whether they continue to have it or not?
Yeah, super great question. And I just want to back up too. You said coaches. And I was like, yes, I'm so glad you said that because we expect doctors to be able to help us, but coaches should really be the first line of defense and something that these are conversations that I know if you're a male, it's not a conversation that sounds fun. Like nobody likes to talk about periods. I mean, trust me, even women don't, it's just, but it is part of life. And it's something that we need to be more comfortable talking about because I had male coaches most of certainly in college and then even post-collegiately. And these are just general conversations that should be as simple as saying like, hey, I have to stop and pee on a run. Like it's important that we're talking about this openly. Okay. Now to answer your actual question, Where does that loss of period come from? So like it's the energy gap that's missing. And so you can do these big runs. It's not about the intensity of your run. It's just if you're not able to meet it with the nutrition needs. So like if you're doing all these high impact workouts and you're grinding with all these long runs, you have to match it with nutrition. So there is your energy needs are not being met. And so like I said, we can either back down on the training or up the nutrition. And usually runners are going to want to up the nutrition. But I find that a lot of runners I work with are, believe it or not, afraid to eat more because they're afraid to gain weight. And that's where this idea of like, oh, I need to take in as many calories as I'm putting out. And like, that's a whole nother conversation that I don't believe in calorie counting, but I can digress on that for right now. But we need to understand how much our body actually needs to meet the energy demands of running, because you will never be great long term if you're not at least matching the energy demands of your training with your nutrition intake.
It's a very deep question, but I'm curious to get your thoughts on it nonetheless. When we talk about eating more and gaining weight and it being healthy, I think a lot of people, like us as humans, we see ourselves in the mirror. We are very self-critical. Most people are. Some people are more self-critical than another. And it's truly sad when I hear someone talk about looking at themselves in the mirror and like being gross or disgusted at how they look. And that should never be the case, even if you and I would look at it and be like, you're progressing in the right direction. You're getting to a healthier weight. You're eating more. You're doing all these things. How can someone who's listening out there today who isn't proud or happy of how they look um, formulate better self-confidence and be more secure and root out that insecurity that isn't healthy?
Mm. Man, this is a good conversation, and I did not see it all going this way. I love this. I mean, this is exactly what I do with runners. Is I really work on this because we're talking about the foundation of eating enough, but I feel like this even goes. This is like really the first step is allowing yourself to eat more, regardless of what you look like. A lot of runners will think like, "Oh, I feel so fat today. Like I don't need to eat today," or "I didn't run today. I don't need to eat." But the first thing I would say is body image is actually an internal reflection. And so the way that we see ourselves and the way that we view ourselves in the stories that we're telling ourselves versus it's, appreciating how you look, it really starts with that inside look. And it's sounds really cheesy, but that's the truth is you need to start to love and appreciate who you are before you can accept the outside of yourself. And the second thing is we really need to work on body appreciation. You might have some big legs, but you know what? Those legs carry you up the hill 20 miles, 26 miles, 13, however far you're running, like there's a reason that we're built the way that we are. And that's really important to just appreciate. You don't have to love it, but you do have to appreciate it and find gratitude for it. And if we can start there, that's the first step into starting to appreciate and love the way that we look. And the last thing I would say on this topic is, you don't need to look like a runner to be a runner. And that is something that Instagram loves to just show us, that this is what a runner looks like. Or, a lot of my clients will say, oh, my coworker told me like she had no idea I ran marathons because I don't look like a runner. But you don't need to look a certain way to do something that you love. You just need to go out there and do it and be so thankful that your body is allowing you to do that exercise today.
Going back to what I was talking about a few minutes ago about like the 70s and were we even talking about this? I certainly think this conversation has gotten exponentially worse with the introduction of social media. And as much as I make a living off of social media, and I'm sure you do to an extent as well, and I love followers because they help me pay my bills and reach more people and hopefully create greater impact and help people out. Like, I do truly think that there's such the positives outweigh the negatives. And I'm curious your thoughts on this as a mother and thinking about, raising your kids in the age of social media. Like, it's a brutal place to be. I think specifically in adolescence, like part of the reason I think we're so body conscious is because, if we're a female, like we see all our friends on spring break in bikinis in Florida in these like ultra edited photos. They're only going to post those photos. Like they're not posting, they're not posting their quote unquote bad days or their days where they don't feel good or they don't think they look good or whatever it might be. And so it's just this social like fabrication curation of like everyone looking at their best or even like from the mental health perspective, like everyone always looks like no one is going to post and be like, I had a really bad day, guys. It's going to be like, I'm doing so good. So much growth in my life is happening. So just general, and I know that was kind of a rant, but general thoughts on how social media is actually fake. And I think for a lot of people, a net negative than a positive.
Yeah, I totally agree. And raising kids in the day of social media is very scary. I mean, my kids are still young, 5, 3, and 18 months. And so I don't have to deal with it yet, but it's like, oh, I don't know where this is going. I kind of hope it slows down in a way. Like, I agree with you. I appreciate social media for a lot of different reasons. And it's a nice way to stay connected. But you can't compare your bad day or what you know that is like the worst part of yourself. You cannot compare that to somebody else's highlight reel, somebody else's Instagram, because you are not seeing the full picture. And even if you see somebody who looks really great or looks like they're having a lot of fun, you actually have no idea. I mean, I know there's so many situations out there where somebody looks really thin or they look really fit, but all I want to do is say, how are you really? Like,
Mm.
are you battling cancer? Are you struggling with an eating disorder? Are you so depressed that you're not eating? I was like 1 or 2 years ago. I wish I knew all the details on this, but I can't remember. It was Miss America who had committed suicide. And, like we would look at her and think, oh my gosh, she's literally like dream come true, has it all together, looks amazing, has it all. And she's not happy. So you can't ever look at social media and assume you know somebody's story, because you just don't. Even a friend of yours, until you get in on that deep conversation with them, you really don't know the story and you can't compare your life to theirs.
A crazy stat I came across a few years ago was the odds of you existing as like uniquely you is 400 trillion to one. I think of that stat and I think a plethora of things, but in regards to this conversation, I hear that stat and I think if the odds of you existing, Courtney, are 400 trillion to one and me existing 400 trillion to one, what your body needs is probably way different than what my body needs. And I think something that social media has done a poor job of, and I referenced this earlier in terms of nutrition advice, is like, it's like a one size fits all. Let's throw this out there. This is like true for everyone. And
Mhm.
I think outside of like some general claims about like making sure you're eating enough and like a lot of those general things, the hyper specifics of like you need to take this supplement or like whatever it might be, or eat this specific grams of carbs every day, is just not true because we are so individualistic. Can you speak to that individualism that should exist in nutrition that doesn't?
Oh my gosh, I also love, like, you're asking just all the right questions. It is so right up my alley. And so, I see this a lot where runners will come to me and they're like, "Oh, well, my training partner eats this, or my training partner doesn't take a gel at 30 minutes into a run or 60 minutes in. So maybe I shouldn't either." We're always comparing. I hate it even worse when a spouse will compare to the other spouse, male to female. And it's like, oh my gosh, we're totally different. But
Right.
you're not, nobody's the same. Even if you have a twin, you're not the same. You still have some genetic differences, or your daily needs are still different. And so it's really important that we're understanding that no two people are the same. I love the quote you shared. Your needs are never going to be the same. Even if you're on the same collegiate team, maybe you even live in the same house, you do the same workouts, you both go to class all day, you might have a lot of similarities. You're not the same, and you're going to need different things. And so that's where we go back to what I said earlier, which is nutrition is an art and a science. And the science says these are the general recommendations that we should be aiming for. But that's where I love intuitive eating, in listening to your body. Are you hungry? Are you full? What are you craving? Are you eating mindfully? What is your body telling you? Because there is no calculation out there to tell you exactly how much you need every day. Sure, there are calculators that can get us pretty close to that, but your body is going to tell you those little pieces in between there, where that macronutrient calculator can't possibly answer that for you every day.
Something else I want to address with you in regards to social media is a lot of people call themselves nutritionists. And I
Mm.
realized through research that anyone can call themselves that because it's not a legally protected term. So I could go on social media and completely rebrand the running effect as like, I run a nutrition business. And I think it gives this false perception to people that that person actually knows what they're talking about. When in reality, maybe they might, maybe they don't, like, but like it's just way too much of a open ball, whereas the term registered dietitian is a legally protected term. And those who are registered dietitians like know better than anyone. You got to go through a lot of training and a lot of things to actually achieve that term. Can you speak about what labels people should be looking for when they are looking to get information?
Yeah, really good question again. So you're right. Anybody can be a nutritionist. You can take a couple of hour certification course on the internet and be a certified nutritionist, which that sounds great. You're like, yeah, that seems to check out. That seems like somebody I should follow. No, wrong. I mean, they might know a little bit, but they're not a registered dietitian. So you want to start at a minimum getting your nutrition information from a registered dietitian. A registered dietitian now is somebody who goes through a minimum of 4 years bachelor degree. So I have a bachelor's of nutrition in dietetics. And then it's a requirement now to get a master's degree. I have a master's in public health nutrition. And then you also have to sit for a year intern, or you have to sit for an exam after you do a year-long internship. So I did my internship for an entire year at the Cleveland Clinic, and they don't pay you for that. There's a lot of learning. And so that's what's important to recognize is there's such a difference in education, but also when you go and look at research studies and things like that, look at who's doing those research studies. Sometimes like you can almost find an answer. Like if you're looking for proof that red meat is bad, you can find that. There's no doubt. But you can also find that the opposite is true as well. So depending on what you're looking for in these research studies, you can probably find it, but look who's hosting that study, who's funding that study. Was there a dietitian on board? Like, where are these recommendations coming from? You need to peel the onion back and not just read things on Instagram or like see this like sexy headline. I mean, that's how magazines love that, right? Tabloids love how J-Lo lost 50 pounds or whatever. I don't even know who's relevant anymore. But let's unpack that a little bit. Where is all this coming from? Who gave this advice? And so yes, start with a registered dietitian, and then ideally as a runner, a certified sports dietitian is the next step, which is a bit more of an advanced certification that you can get, because dietitians too, like doctors, are like it's pretty vague. Like as a dietitian, you can work pediatrics, you can work inpatient, you can work ICU. There's lots of things you can do, but until you really focus on the sports world, your community dietitian at like the local hospital might not be able to help you in terms of sports.
It's funny you mentioned kind of the research and study parts, because pulling back curtain on my family, I'm the youngest of 6 kids, so massive family, and we're all into different things. And like one of my sisters has like an autoimmune disease. One of my brothers is like into one sort of sport. I'm into running. I had another brother-in-law who was into like Ironman. So it's just like you throw all these people who are opinionated in one room, and it was just chaos. And it's funny you say that, because I personally experienced that, where it's like the we all had like differing nutrition views, and someone would always be able to find a study that contradicted the other person's study. So I experienced it in real time. How hard do you think it is to find truth in today's society when, as you said, like you can find anything? And I've also noticed this in AI with ChatGPT. It will give you like false answers, and then you'll be like, is that actually true? And it'll be like, no, it's not. I like, sorry. And it's just like, how do we believe what we see is true? Like, yeah, I know you said like look for who's on that research paper or whatnot, but how can people actually believe that what they're seeing is true and look for the right things? Because people are constantly trying to deceive to get across things, and specifically in the medical world, like I will, again, hot take maybe, but like I will say a lot of it's corrupt. Like a lot of these organizations are funded by outsized entities that like want to sell product or want to sell medicine or whatever it might be. So
Yeah.
anyways, a lot of rant for you there, but any thoughts?
No, I love that. 6 kids, though. I'm still processing that. Your family. Like I have three, and it feels like I own a small circus.
My parents are
So
crazy.
definitely. But yeah, so we talked about, who's funding the study is a big factor. How big was the study too? Like if there's 5, 6 people in that study, it's like, well, okay, you want a big and a long-term study, and I don't want to go too far into, some of these weight loss drugs that are out there now, like Ozempic, but what are the long-term effects? Like we don't know long-term, unless like a medication or a supplement has been on the market for at least 20 years, we don't truly know the long-term effects of this. So that's what you would want to look for too. So who did the study, who funded it, the size of it, and how long has it been going on? And because those are really the key factors here. But I also feel like, I'm trying to think of the quote my husband always uses. It's like, there's his truth, her truth, and the truth in between, something like that. It's like
Yes.
there's usually something in between there. And I have found in all my years of being a dietitian now, I don't even know, 12, 13 years, it's like If something is telling you something super extreme, like don't eat any meat or don't eat, milk is awful, don't drink any milk ever. It's like, well, maybe we're somewhere in between that. Like how many times have we gone back and forth with eggs of like, eggs are good, eggs are horrible. Like, well, maybe some eggs are fine. Like there's usually that truth right in between. And, it's cliche to say like, just it's all about balance. It's all about moderation. Cause it's like, well, what does that really mean? But that's usually where the truth lies, is somewhere in between.
Totally. Do you think there is an over obsession in today's culture around nutrition and what we eat?
Yeah, definitely. And I think some of it's for good reason. Like things are obviously made different than they were many years ago. But it almost feels, nutrition feels a little bit like politics, where it's like everyone has these really strong opinions and they can really go head to head. You're talking about that with your siblings and you guys are from the same family. Like I would imagine you grew up with the same, diet and lifestyle. And even that, you guys still have some, headbutting there. So yeah, I think there's a lot of talk about nutrition. It's a really heavy topic for some people. And it's so important that everybody's understanding that, like I said, there's balance, moderation. Like it doesn't have to be so extreme. You can eat some meatless meals, and then I think it's okay to eat meat, and I think it's okay to have sweets, but should we have them every day? Should we have them every meal? It's all about finding that balance, because at the end of the day, like, this is your life and you should enjoy it. Like we only have one life. I don't want you wasting your life counting calories or fine reading labels, and like there's so much more that you could be using your brain space for.
What do you think are the biggest things? And I know this is like, again, could be its own podcast and like a very vague general question, but what are the biggest things runners should be focusing on and not focusing on? And I'll just give you a prompt, like, should runners be focusing on the organic label or no? Like things like that.
Mm. I mean, we've talked about already, like focusing on getting enough. Like, let's start there. Get enough food, at minimum 3 balanced meals, nail your pre-run nutrition, nail your post-run nutrition. I would say simple carbohydrates before you run. Don't need to stress about organic, like simple carbs, graham crackers, white toast, like those white products that we've always like thought were bad. Those are awesome before we go run. And then in terms of like other things of like do's and don'ts, like huge things, I don't really have any. It comes down to, like I said, getting in enough. And that's the primary focus. Like, do you need all organic? No, like I'm not going to buy an organic banana. Sometimes they just fall into my cart. I don't know. I can't help it. But you're going to peel it back, like you don't need, like, there's like, sure, if you want to buy organic strawberries, like, absolutely. They're pretty dirty, like, that's great. But like, are you going to shave 10 seconds off your 5K PR by eating all organic? I hate to break it to you, but probably not. Is it better for your long-term health? Yeah, probably. But you have to find again what works for you. Like, does that fit your budget? Does that fit your wallet? When I was in college, I was not buying organic. There was no way, so you don't have to stress over the minute details. I just want you to start getting used to consistent intake that makes your body feel good. Like eating fast food all the time is probably not going to make you feel good. But cooking at home and cooking balanced meals and eating a variety of foods, that's going to make you feel good. And that's what's important.
I want to give some context to your background and how we got to where we are today. Obviously said that you're a registered dietitian. You're also a certified diabetes instructor. You're a mother of three, which we talked about. But going way back in time, I grew up in Medina, Ohio, or probably some subset of some county that's close to it. You ran cross country and track at the University of Cincinnati, so you were very good. And then currently you have PRs of 17:10 in the 5K, 1:19:19 in the half marathon, and 2:57 in the marathon, which is smoking super fast. Where did the desire to study nutrition come from? And can you kind of give me the Spark Notes version of some of those different key moments throughout your life that have shaped who you are today?
Yeah, I love that. And also, if you have any young listeners, they probably don't even know what Spark Notes are anymore, because I feel like that's like becoming an older thing. But yes, the like short version. Wait, what was your actual question?
Yeah, just some of those different moments that I mentioned there, like to get to where you are today, and specifically, like what was the impetus to start studying nutrition and be interested in this field of work?
Yes, great question. Okay, so I started running in middle school because my sister was doing it. And, as a younger sister, you just do everything your older sibling does. And so I just followed her and started running. And then it started to get more interesting of like, oh, wait a minute, what I eat affects my performance. And that started to connect for me around my senior year of high school. I actually was not good in high school at all. I still feel like I owe my high school coaches an apology because I was a huge slacker and like didn't really want to be there. I actually walked onto the team at University of Cincinnati my sophomore year because somebody was like, "Oh, you're pretty good. You should try out." And I'm like, "All right, here we go." And it worked out. So, and I've loved it so much ever since. But when I got to college, I started studying nutrition, thinking like, oh, I'm going to learn like what's healthy. And I think this is how a lot of dietitians get into nutrition is we're like almost wrapped up in like, I want to be the healthiest version of myself. And like, you almost start it from more of a negative place of like, oh, I want to know how to be skinny and I want to know how to be fit and know how to be healthy. And then I got into it and it was like, oh, wow, this is chemistry and physics. And like, this is not what I thought. And so I actually almost thought about switching over to nursing, which is a second like huge desire of mine. But I wouldn't have been able to run. I would have been ineligible to run. So I was like, okay, never mind. I'm not switching. I'm just going to stick it out. And I really fell in love with understanding how much food impacts our daily life, and that desire of like learning to be healthy has faded. I mean, I still want to be healthy, of course, but like doing it from like more of an aesthetics reason faded into helping people and helping people feel good. That's where the benefit is, not just looking good, but feeling good.
What would you say presently? So April 9th, 2025. What's the most like pressing nutrition question in your head that you're trying to understand deeper or interests you the most?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, let's think. I feel like so much of it is, I brought up these weight loss drugs earlier, and I
Ozempic is the
gotta
rage.
touch on that again. So I worked in a diabetes clinic for a while, and then before I had kids, and then once I had kids, I didn't want to go back to the clinic and have my own, create my own business here. But we actually prescribed Ozempic back, this is, I don't know, 5, 6 years ago as a diabetes medication, not as a weight loss medication. It was like this could, also help you lose weight. But now I feel like so many people are on it. I don't know where this is going to take our society. Like, is this going to make us more weight focused? Is this going to make us more body conscious? Where is our society going with this? And what are the long-term effects of this? Because we're still not teaching these people how to eat well, and it's really a band-aid effect. And so like that's a very pressing topic in my mind, and I don't know that we'll know the answer to that for a while. But is this going to make us an actual overall healthy society, or is this going to actually just be more damaging to our body image and overall health in the long term?
So fascinating. Yeah, the I heard someone make a comment about it that like, for as long as history has been around, like if you are, and again, give me some grace with some of these terms because fit, can be defined XYZ way after everything that we just talked about. Being healthy is way more important, but using those terms kind of coinciding, like if you come across someone on the street who like looks healthy and looks fit and is just generally you can tell takes care of their body, like there is a mutual unsaid like sign of respect for that person of like you worked hard or you must have like trained hard to get to that place or you must be a runner, go to the gym. And it says a lot about the type of person you are because someone who goes to the gym or runs pushes their body, knows the importance of discipline and hard work and dedication. And with these introductions of these drugs, it's just going to complicate things a ton subconsciously of like, did you cut corners to get to where you are? And are you actually living a healthy lifestyle? Or is it just like, yeah, like you said, the band-aid effect where it's like you're putting a band-aid over a problem and then you go back and you aren't living a healthy lifestyle. So I think it's fascinating. And I think as a society, I'm both so optimistic about where we're headed while also at the same time utterly terrified. And I know like you have 3 kids and they're all pretty young, but like for me, when I think down the road, when I have kids, I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't even want to know where we're going to be at in like 5, 10 years. By the time my kids are in high school, like what social, are we going to have chips in our brain or are we going to be like every disease has a solution to it? Like what spectrum are we going to be on? So it's really
Yeah.
interesting questions, and we live in such a fascinating time period. So,
Yeah, I
um,
mean, so much has changed in our life already. Like my husband and I talk a lot about how, I mean, I'm not that old. And, just even thinking about like cell phones, like we remember a time where you printed off directions to drive somewhere,
yep.
and like you didn't have GPS. I mean, maybe I had like the TomTom device, but like we've gone from that to like where we are now. Where are we going to go in 20 years? Medically speaking, nutritionally speaking, research, there's just so much unknown and it's exciting and scary at the same time.
Totally. We'll wrap up here and I'll have to get you back on because I feel like we are just scratching the
I
surface
know
of
so
the
much to talk about.
massive world of nutrition. But blood work, what's your take on that? And if not blood work, are there any other things that can help people realize and understand their individualism and how they respond to foods better or worse or negatively, positively, whatever it might be?
Yeah, I think like an annual blood work is always good, especially getting your iron levels checked for runners, especially menstruating female runners, vitamin D levels, especially if you live in a place like Portland where the sun doesn't shine all winter long. It's always good to know those markers, but also just getting your overall, like a nice blood panel done annually and having that relationship with your doctor. That's a great place to start at a minimum. And then there's some extra things you can do, like Inside Tracker is a way to get your blood drawn at your local lab and then you send it in, and they have a whole website where your blood levels come back and they tell you what foods you need and how you can add in more of this, that, and basically balance things out a little bit. So you can certainly do that. It's obviously more expensive, not going to be covered by your insurance, but I also think that there's just so much benefit of listening to your body. And it's, people want to cut corners. It's like, oh, I'm craving carbs. Or like, I've always heard like, oh, I'm craving chocolate. Oh, I must need magnesium. I should eat some almonds. And it's like, or maybe you should just have a piece of chocolate. Like maybe you just need more carbohydrates. Like it's really just your body. Like your body will let you know if you quiet the other noise and just slow down and listen to it.
So good. Courtney, final question for you. And I know we've covered so many different subjects within this. It could be something new. It could be double tapping on something we've talked about already. But what's the final takeaway message that you want to leave with the audience today?
Oh gosh. I love that we touched on body image so much because I have found that both men and women struggle with that. And, we think that that's an issue among female athletes or females in general. And I know that it's not. I know it's both sides of it. And I just want everybody to understand that, your body you have one body and one life to live, and the way you treat it matters. And so instead of just spending your whole life trying to change your body and shrink yourself, I really want everybody to start to find some body appreciation and body gratitude, because I truly think that's the first step to fueling yourself right. Because if you can appreciate your body, you're going to want to start to fuel it correctly.
Courtney, for those who enjoyed this conversation, which I'm sure is literally anyone who listened, there's no way that people didn't learn something new or take away something new. That's certainly me. Where can people find you, find your work? And for those who are interested in working with you more or reading your content or whatever it might be, where would you send and direct people?
Yeah, definitely over to my Instagram at eatwell.runbetter. Message me over there. You can just drop me a line and say, hey, that you enjoyed the podcast. That'd be great. But you can also check out my website, which is also eatwellrunbetter.com. Try to keep it simple for y'all. And then my signature program is my Nutrition for Runners program, where we pretty much talk about this way more in depth over the course of 3 months. So if you want a lot more of this, then join us over in the Nutrition for Runners program.
I love it. Courtney, final question for you. The question I ask every single guest on every single podcast, and it happens to be food based. If you had Gordon Ramsay coming over to your house for dinner, what would you choose to make for him?
Oh, I have to make it?
You have to cook for Gordon
Oh,
Ramsay. What are you
I
making?
thought he was going to cook for me.
No.
That should be the question. It's on top of my mind because I'm making it tonight, but I make a pretty
Oh,
mean lasagna. So it's
okay.
it's an Instapot lasagna, so it's a little quicker, but it's great. So I'm gonna make some lasagna and some garlic bread for him.
I love it. That's like the perfect runner's meal right there.
Yeah,
Also,
right.
I don't know if you knew this, but Gordon, I think he's done over 10 marathons in his life. So he's actually a runner.
All right,
So
did not know that. See, learn
yeah,
something every
yeah,
day.
exactly. Well, Courtney, thank you so much. I appreciate you taking time out of your remarkably busy life. I don't know how you do it all. I'll probably ask you next time we do another podcast with each other. But thank you so much for enlightening me and my audience. And this stuff is so crucial and critical. And again, it's more than just running fast times. It's about like living within this vessel that you've been given and being healthy and choosing to be healthy. And I think you gave people a lot of tools to begin that journey or become better at that journey. So keep up the great work and excited for more conversations down the road.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.